Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album, sort of new album, from Gabriel Flashin. Gabriel is a German producer whose real name I don't feel like trying to pronounce, and who had been recommended via Pandora ages ago while looking for artists similar to Sounds from the Ground. Now, he has some things in common with SFTG, though I found in general it's probably not fair for me to continually bring them up in conversations of pretty much every chill-out or dub act I come across. Now, Gabriel is ridiculously prolific. Besides the work he's done under his own name, he's also done work in the group Safi Brothers, as well as Dub Location and Oral Float. And let me tell you, thanks to his relative obscurity, I found it pretty dang difficult to keep track of all he's released. There's so freaking much of it, and it's tough to keep track of, but I have had most of his solo discography lying around on my iPod for a few years now. I'll be brutally honest and admit that while I've attempted to get through this guy's discography several times now, I've been wanting to start over and make sure I'd fully digested everything, and as a result, I don't often get past his second album. Farthest I'd made before making this video I think was Real Time, but yeah. But there's nothing to drive motivation for me to get through a long discography like making a video on a new album from that artist. And once I discovered that he had a new album called Flashin' this year, albeit a few months ago, so I was gonna be pretty late, but whatever, this gave me the push I needed to finally get through Gabriel imposing back catalog. Even though there actually was a new Safi Brothers album, like, I think less than a month ago. I'll have to check that one out too. But I wanted to check out Gabriel stuff, finally make it through his catalog. So before I get into our usual in brief segment, which is not going to be remotely brief and probably take up most of this video, I'm first saying this just covers his solo stuff. And just the albums I currently have on my iPod. I might have missed some, but I mainly went according to like his Discogs page. And also, excuse me in advance in case I screw up genre terminology, but let's just get into it. Without any further ado, here are my thoughts on his discography so far. This is probably the album of his I listened to the most because it's taken this long to get through his discography and I've started over a lot. Though I can confirm his is the kind of music that works better with more repeat listens. Dub techno with a uniquely chill and laid-back atmosphere that doesn't take away from its danceability. Thumbs up there. There's some more interesting elements in this one, got some guitars and stuff in some parts, overall more enjoyable, more solid, and it's got one hell of an opening track. Freaking love Unlimited Love. Fantastic. And this one's even better, now including elements of world music and down-tempo. Nice variety. Solid overall. Nothing new, fairly similar to the previous album, with dub, techno, down-tempo, and various world music influences, though I think this one in general has a looser and more laid-back vibe to it. Pretty cool. This was the album Pandora recommended to me to check the guy out. It may be instrumentally similar to the previous album, but it's better in basically every way. More focused, feels more like an album than a random collection of songs, it's catchier and more memorable, and I think it might even help reduce airsickness. Nothing super new, SFTG-esque dub chill-out stuff with some more techno, but yeah, every single track on here is great. Not much to report with this one either, still follows his usual style, but a pretty fun listen nonetheless. There's supposedly a video version of this album as well, but I have not seen that yet. This one shows him moving in a much more straightforward techno direction, not quite as loose or laid back and a lot tighter and more beat heavy. It's not the best thing he's ever done, don't really care for the stock Apple sound effects on some tracks, but it's still alright. Yep, he collaborated with Pete Namlook. And it sounds basically how you would expect, and it's pretty awesome. Another dub techno heavy release, this one notable for the addition of African singers and performers to give it some more flavor. Definitely one of his better ones. Another more straightforward techno, tech house kind of thing. Maybe not the most unique release in his catalog, but no less enjoyable than the rest of his stuff. There are some beautiful moments on this thing. I particularly like the track I, George. Another solid dub techno release, not much else to say, and I also don't want to make it sound like he's making the same album over and over. All of these albums have had a distinct sound so far. This one is more streamlined and cohesive than the last one. bit cleaner sound too, so yeah, that's a good one. This one's like a compilation of tracks from his previous couple of albums, mainly Level and Benevolent Chaos, with some new ones, and it's all beatless versions. The lack of drum tones doesn't take away from the pulse though, and it just, kind of gives it more of a laid-back vibe. This one wouldn't stand out much ordinarily, kind of like a bit more energetic and house-oriented look at some of his more recent techno work. But what does make this one special is the existence of a companion album of vocal versions of all these tracks. Pretty cool, I'd say. Which brings us to here. By my count, that would make this his 15th album? Though I would not be surprised if I missed a couple. And so far, basically all of these albums so far have been their own thing, ranging anywhere from techno and house, to downtempo and ambient, to anything in between, all meanwhile consistently maintaining his own heavily dub-influenced style. Going into this new album, I had no idea what to expect. I guess I'd figured he'd be doing something more in the techno vein, since that's just what most of his recent releases seem to have done. But as it turns out, on Flashin' On, he threw yet another left hook and went 100% down-tempo chill out. No techno beats to be found here this time, and let me tell you, I thought it was fantastic even right on first listen. A very pleasant surprise indeed. While I haven't been paying attention to his work with Safi Brothers or Oral Float or any of his other stuff that is not under his own name, it's been quite a while since he'd made something in this vein, and he definitely brought his A-game here. Not only is there a super wide instrumental palette ranging from synth grooves to string pads to lots of various MIDI guitar textures, or maybe some are actually live recorded, but it can be kind of hard to tell sometimes. But he manages to change up the atmosphere from track to track just enough to keep it interesting, but not so much that it feels like a disjointed experience in any way. So going down track by track, Iced Wire is a fitting opener with lots of cascading synths and relaxing guitar patterns, and an overall very melancholy and cinematic vibe, and that cinematic vibe is even enhanced on on tracks like Floating Downstream, which even has these string pads on it and a somewhat jazzy percussion track, another really melancholy sort of track. But then it takes a turn to the tense and almost bitter sounding We Are One. I mean, not bitter sounding in a bad way, by the way. But it mainly features layers and layers of guitar textures and a more intense beat, and in some points it feels like it's an 80s new age take on a Western movie soundtrack or something, which sounds really weird, I know, but it works, I like it. And along the track has a lot of these fast-paced synth phrases contrasting with these psychedelic pads and echoing 808 percussion. And Souls to me sounds like it's taking some reggae influence, with some pretty in-your-face guitar melodies. I should mention, I think melodically, this album is one of Gabriel Lamar's best in a long time. His main asset is his attention to detail, and not his ear for catchy hooks. But I will say this is definitely a step up in that department from the usual from him. Anyway, Cherish Illusions has a strange and almost hip-hop influenced beat with some quiet electric piano lines for atmosphere and distorted guitars for grit and texture. And Feel Like We Peak is probably the most intense track on here, mostly letting its synth, bass, and guitar lines carry all the work, and not forming a particularly immersive atmosphere, but it's pretty minimalistic. It definitely stands out. Singularity, though, is probably the most up-tempo track on here, again with lots of layered guitar sounds, and with a, flanging synth pad in the background that vaguely recalls, I don't know, Giorgio Moroder or something. And I'll admit, after that it takes a less interesting detour with Wellness City Blues, which doesn't stand out much among the rest of these tracks. And Your Love Light, which does have a really nice bass line, but isn't a huge standout either. Although I do like the track Voyager, mainly thanks to its jazzy acoustic bass texture. But I also like all the various fluttering bell synths around and occasional modulated pianos. The album also ends with a beatless version of Floating Downstream, which, personally, I prefer the original. Feels a little unnecessary, given that the beat wasn't particularly strong in the original, but whatever. And also an alternate version of Iced Wire, which has a lot more psychedelic guitars on it and stuff, and I'm not sure whether or not I like this one more than the original, but They're both pretty cool. So I think that about sums up Flashin' On. If I might nitpick this album, it's that this is one of the few Gabriel Lamar albums that hasn't been growing on me with repeat listens. I mean, it hasn't exactly been shrinking either, but, you know, I feel like its vibe, while it doesn't overstay its welcome, but if you added more, it might have been. And like I said, it does take a little bit of a downturn near the end, but I do have to say, I haven't really heard a Gabriel Lamar album that was this immediately gratifying to date. I am still a sucker for this particular kind of chill-out sound. I feel like this was the kind of album I hoped to get out of him when I first checked him out in like 2014-ish, and hoped for something along the same lines as SFTG and Magic Sound, Fabric, and 01, and was initially disappointed that I didn't get, which is kind of ironic given that I've now accepted that Lamar is not really in that same crowd. I mean, he's not really in any crowd, really. He can do whatever he wants, and this just shows he's as good with straightforward techno as he is with this kind of more intricately textured downtempo. And as always, it was a real pleasure to take in the huge variety of styles and sounds that Gabriel Lamar has had to offer over the course of his solo career. I can see myself coming back to any of this guy's music, and this is probably one of my favorites from him to date. I'm overall feeling a solid 8 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.